Hey everyone, so Joe Cresci here with another episode of RevOps 500, and I can't tell you how pumped and stoked I am to be having our special guest today. He's someone who I've looked at from afar for a very long time. He's a consultant at a HubSpot elite partner in the UK called BabelQuest. They're one of the best in the business, and so is he. So Chris Grant, welcome to RevOps 500.
God, thanks. I love an intro like that. It makes you feel great, doesn't it? It's all buttering the ego. But no, fabulous. Thank you for having me. Really exciting to do something like this.
Yeah, and happy you're here. So, Chris, why don't we just jump right into it? So, why don't you share your biggest mistake with our listeners?
So, do you know, I've been thinking about this for, well, ever since you started talking to me. And I actually think my biggest mistake was probably early career, staying at the same place for too long. I mean, weirdly, I'll kind of explain all, but I think it was I went somewhere and I was working in a sales job, and I stayed. It was cushy, it was comfortable, and I just stayed. And I ended up being there for about 10 years. And I
Okay.
think, and I kind of, it was one of those things where it's almost like the frog being boiled in a big pan, where you just stay somewhere. When it left, it was suddenly like, oh, hang on, there's a big wide world out there, and actually suddenly started doing things that sort of shaped what I'm doing now, rather than just being kind of stuck. So yeah, I mean, it's. I think lots of people do it. We get kind of stuck, and we put up with all the stuff, all the management stuff, the bits and pieces, and you just sort of insulate yourself from it, and you stay,
So true.
and you stop learning, you stop looking for something more exciting, and you just kind of coast, and it's easy and it's comfortable, and there's nobody. I mean, you've got sales targets, but nobody's pushing you really. Nobody's saying try and do something else. The clients you're working with all know you, and it just, yeah, just you stop challenging yourself.
Like, that is so interesting because I think you were a sales director at what was the name of the company again? Remind me.
Passel,
Passel.
which
Okay.
fabulous piece of kit, but never say anything against them. But
Uh,
it was actually the job before that. I kind of started as a sales rep, and then you kind of go through all the
okay.
sales
But
levels.
but Chris, I'm gonna cut you off because sales is like a constant grind. I mean, you're saying that you got
Mm,
bored in sales, which is hard to do. And to be in sales for 10 years is very, very hard because you've got to make quotas quarterly, monthly,
mm.
yearly. And so to even stay in the job is hard, let alone and to stay in the job and be good at it enough to where you can be in it for 10 years means you have to be evolving, adding to your skill set. So you must have been doing all that, but how do you get bored? How do you get bored doing that? I'm shocked, really.
I think you're probably right. I don't think it's bored as much as the nuance of kind of being stuck in a rut. When you're just doing, you're doing the same thing with the same people, and it gets comfortable, it gets easy. And I think that
Okay.
I always think that what I'm doing now, I love doing, and it's one of those things where certainly the sort of what I would call the cutting edge of doing HubSpot stuff. If you spend a week without learning what's going on, a week without trying to find new solutions, new way to use tools and toys, you're actually you fall behind, and
Wow.
you don't know. And I think it's probably the way my brain works, which is that I want to absorb knowledge. I want to solve problems, really, which is my favorite thing to do.
That's so interesting. And the sales problems that you were solving early in your career for 10 years, 12 years,
Mm.
if you count your time as Passable as a director, you're saying that those were not, I mean, you just found them routine. You just found them very routine and mundane. Is that
I think, yeah,
accurate or?
I was selling ads, and it was
Okay.
kind of print ads, and it was kind of that point where the world kind of changed from selling print ads to
Okay.
selling digital,
Okay.
and And nobody really knew what digital was doing, and social media came along, and you were kind of going, how can we advertise? How can we make money out of monetizing our social media? And sell stuff on our social media to people who've got more followers or whatever it was. And
Okay.
yeah, and I tell you, it's one of those things that I've been thinking about this a lot, and it's quite hard to put into words, but it's that sort of constant different challenges. So what I'll be doing now, I'll kind of go into companies, and each company's different, and they all have their own problems, issues, fabulous things about them. But I think when you're doing the same thing in the same place year after year, it's almost like, if you think farming,
Yeah.
I'd probably get bored of that. You sow the seeds, and animals dig them up, I tend to speak in metaphors like that quite a lot, but yeah, it's that sort of annual cycle that just gets to be a little bit of a grind. And I think it was almost like once you get out of that, and you suddenly discover there's a big wide world of possibility that nobody's told you about.
So what did you discover? Once you what was the tipping point? So obviously did it come suddenly, this whole thing that I want to switch, or was it just kind of like a gradual slow burn? Or
I
walk
think
me through that a little bit.
so. I was working this job, and actually somebody who I'd previously worked with gave me a call. He said, "I'm working at a startup. This was Basel, and we're looking for people, and we'd like you to come along." And I think it was probably just at that point where I thought, why not? So I went along and had a chat, and it sounded exciting. And suddenly, like literally within a month, I'd kind of given in my notice. I kind of gave it a month's notice, and my boss accepted it, and then came back about a week later saying, "You're supposed to be on 3 months' notice, Chris." And and I said, "Well, you've already accepted it. I've accepted the job." And I suddenly jumped, and it was going from a sort of bigger organisation to a startup where you're a little bit more scrappy, or you're trying new things, you're doing different things, and it was actually while I was working there that I was trying to sell something to the people I currently work for, Becky and Eric, and I sort of went along to them. Um, and I was trying to sell some stuff to them, and actually, we kind of established a bit of a relationship, and they got me to come and speak at some of their HubSpot user group meetings, and then 2 years later, I was selling HubSpot at BabelQuest, and gradually transitioned out of sales because I just started getting interested. It was sort of, well, wait a minute, there's tool sets here that make a difference. I can see people open my emails. I can see what's going on, and I started devoting more and more time to learning about it. And I actually then sort of started making the move probably about 8 years ago towards consultancy.
That's right.
And suddenly the world is open to you because you're going into different companies, and you're learning how different people do things. And I think it's so interesting for me to just see how different companies are structured, how different sales processes work, and how actually you can look at something from the outside and suddenly see the exact point where there's a problem, whereas from the inside it's often quite hard. You can't see it, and I think that was what kind of got me thinking back to spending 10 years somewhere being a big mistake, was that you don't see from the inside what any problems are, and then suddenly you go outside and you look at something and you go, I can see that, and I can see why that's happening.
That is so like, but again, so you still had, so you had the 10 years in the one place, 2 more years in sales. Even then at BabelQuest, you're still starting. They brought you in as a salesperson, not as a HubSpot guru, right?
No,
But
no,
then,
absolutely not.
but then, you became one. About remind me again, how long were you at BabelQuest in the sales role before you moved into the consultant role that you have now?
It's quite hard to tell because I think the lines were blurred. It was sort of it was at the time when the buzzword was sales enablement, which I always like to think of as sales ennoblement because I thought that was a fun, nicer way to talk about it. But back then, that was the buzzword. We were helping salespeople to do things. We were selling things to sales teams, and actually, it's almost that you were showing people how to do something,
That's
and then
right.
suddenly asking a question, and you know, how would how does your sales process work, and trying to understand what they were doing to work out how you could solve for them. And probably if if I have a fault, I have lots of them. You kind of go deeper. I want to go deeper. I want to know why. It's that, and it's that thing that when we're kids, they always try and breed out of us, like stop the children asking why because
Why?
it's a
Yeah.
bad thing, but actually it's a fabulous thing. And I've always been that person that asks why. And I think you're going through a sales process, and you can go too deep, and you can get too involved with what's going on. And I think that was the sort of that transition point for me was I'm really interested. Here's a problem. I can ask all the questions. I can understand, and then I can hopefully solve it, and suddenly see the impact on a graph that goes up and to the right where before it didn't.
That is like, so it is really by accident almost, just by you being you in your sales discovery process with prospects for BabelQuest, agency services. You were kind of figuring out, okay, why is this happening? You get the client to think you're being a good salesperson, more or less. You're trying to get them to think about things in a broader view. And while you're going through that journey of being a salesperson for an agency, you become a consultant for the agency over time in sort of a mixed up sort of way. It's not like a one time thing where just all of a sudden, boom, here's a cutoff date, and Chris is now a consultant, not a salesperson anymore.
Yeah, and I think absolutely it happened over time, and there was almost that moment when I realised that I was probably going too deep, and actually there was. I mean, thinking about incidents that helped lead to it. There's one day, and it was when we started recording and analysing calls, and
Okay.
my boss Eric, Becky, they were sort of Chris, we've been listening to this call. Can you listen to it and tell us what you think? And I was listening to this call. It was me. I was trying to get a discovery call from a connect call. I got this person on the phone and I talked to them for about 5 or 6 minutes. And listening back to it, you could hear they were ready. They were ready to book the call. They wanted the discovery call. And I kept on talking and asked more questions. And I kept going and going and going. Way past the reasonable amount of time that you should have done. And when you listen back, you can hear them. They're ready. They're excited. There's that constructive tension of we've got a problem. You might be able to solve it. And then there's this sort of gradual deflation. And
Oh,
I never heard from them again after that call, and I properly messed it up. And that was a big learning point for me as well. And I think that was also something that helped me understand that actually I wanted to go deeper and I wanted to actually start fixing sales processes and understanding why things were happening the way they did.
and so whose call was it then to make, like, was it Eric and Becky's call? Said, Chris, we want you to be a consultant now. This sales call was just the sales call from hell, or what exactly was that? What was that all like?
It happened naturally. I mean, that was probably for me. If I look back, that was a big indicator. But I think it was just that fact that we were back then we're a small agency, and I suppose we would have been called ourselves an agency more than consultancy. Then we were we were kind of selling sales services, and
Okay.
I was almost that natural fit to start delivering some of them. So I kind of spent a bit of time wearing two hats, probably, where I was doing some of the sales process as well as delivering some of the sales services.
Got it. So it's a natural process. It's kind of like, you like at analogies and metaphors. I'll give you one. It's kind of like Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader. Sort of somewhere in there. It's like maybe that moment where they gave you the recording call was like the Revenge of the Sith moment, where it's like episode three, and okay, from here on out, I'm kind of like, I might not wear the black mask and the cape, whatever, but I'm Darth
But
Vader at this point. I'm kind of
I
not, I'm
am
no longer
I
Anakin.
am
I am.
fully made that change. Yeah, absolutely. I like that as an analogy. It works very well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think all of these things are often quite gradual and actually trying to put. I mean, it's one of those things when you kind of dig into like a company sales process, you'll find that there may not be a specific point. There's just all these little things that mount up over time.
Yeah, where you become something else, that maybe you never wanted to be in the first place, but over time, you become that way.
I think
Interesting.
it's probably also that you didn't know.
You didn't know.
When I was growing up, my parents were medical, doctors, and
Okay.
doctors don't know anything about the rest of the
CRMs.
world.
No, they don't.
And
They
and
don't.
I think you just kind of they're like you follow the traditional school, university, get a job, and
Right.
you probably don't find out everything that's available in the world.
Until you go see it. Until
Yeah,
you explore it all.
absolutely.
Yeah, that is such an interesting way of looking at it. You were good in sales. I mean, obviously, 12 years. I mean, that's a lifetime. And then you go out and all of a sudden you realize, I'm. This is almost like too routine, too. I don't want to say easy because I don't want to degrade it, but yeah, too not complicated enough maybe, and something different. And you go outside, and you see something else. You see this thing called HubSpot and whatever, and now you go see how other businesses are functioning. All of a sudden, you get a light bulb goes off, and you're a sales doctor. So your parents could call you that. You're a sales process doctor, right? And
I
quite good at it, I might say. So
I mean, there's probably that element of
yeah,
genetics of being able to look at something, ask lots of questions,
press until it
work
hurts.
out, press until it hurts, but work out what the actual problem is. So I wonder, there's probably that sort of way the brain works.
And what about now? Like, I mean, when you're seeing things like when you're seeing sales, because you see sales organizations all day long. I mean, like, so
Hmm.
when you look at these sales orgs and you see how they are, like, don't you, I mean, don't you think do you look at that as mundane at all? Where you see, okay, this is a company with this broken salesperson or marketing sales disaligned, and just like another one that you might talk to 2 hours later on the same day. I mean, oh, this one's selling, marketing services, this one's selling accounting services. Their sales processes are broken in the same way, though. I mean, do you not see
I
it that way,
think
or
they're all unique. I think there are lots of companies that they'll follow a broadly similar process. And marketing develops a lead, hands it over to sales. Sales does a two-step or a three-step, and something gets sold, and then hopefully somebody gives that over to delivery, and they're actually looked after. But there's so many moving parts. There's so many people. There's so many processes or lack of processes, and then there's that. There's technology, and quite often you see. Are you familiar with the idea? I can't remember who said it, but the idea of a technology smear,
no? I've never heard of
which
that one.
is you've got a problem
Okay.
and you buy some tech and you just kind of smear it on the top of the problem, hoping the problem will go
Ah,
away.
yeah.
And you see it a little bit with some of the AI stuff that's coming out now. People don't really know, so they just kind of we'll take some of that and smear it on our problem. And sometimes it takes 3 6 months before you work out that that actually didn't work very well. So then, yeah.
So you find them different. You find them. Every business is different, even though they have like the same function: sales, marketing, operations, customer success, delivery. Even then, you find them. You're fascinated by the broken pieces or like the disconnections between all of that.
Yeah, and I think there's also the amount of difference you can make by just working out what's happening and being able to. I mean, I joke reporting is often the biggest one that you build all this structure so you can see what's happening, and you're trying to build out a dashboard so that you can, I can see this data I've got. I can see what I'm going to do off the back of it. And the joke is often, we'll build that dashboard and you say, well, don't fire anyone off the back of this. Because sometimes you see that salesperson who is pushing out every single deal, or that marketer who needs to get 50 MQLs, so they just go in and mark 50 contacts as an MQL. You see misalignment, and you see KPIs that don't interact at all. Sort of, you need to do this, you need to do that, but this and that don't work together. So it's constantly fascinating for me.
Okay, so going back, if you could, like, what would you do? What would you do differently? Would you leave the job, the ad selling job, like after 2 years, 5 years? I mean, what would you do differently?
I would say it was an early career job. So probably 5 years would have been absolutely spot on, I think. And then,
Okay,
and probably from there,
5 years.
maybe I'd have ended up in a different sales job. And actually, I would have probably gone, oh, actually, if I'd moved on every now and again, I would have kept challenging myself instead of sticking in the same place.
And now, but now you've been in BabelQuest now for about 7 years.
Nearly 10.
Nearly 10.
Nearly 10. I'm coming up on my second sabbatical.
So what happens? I mean, do you feel like that itch coming at all? Like, or do you feel like it's a mistake staying long and with the team there, or what?
No, I think it's because I really enjoy what I'm doing. I think when I was selling ads, I didn't particularly enjoy it. I just did it because it's almost, when you're younger and it takes time to learn how the world works, and it's that whole knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Experience is knowing that you don't put it in a fruit salad. And I think that takes a bit of time to learn. And I think there's quite a lot of things that I'm doing now that just add different layers. So I'm lucky enough to teach the HubSpot Super Admin Bootcamp.
That's right.
Which is, we do 3-4 cohorts a year. It's a 6-week course. We get hundreds of people on the course, and every time it's different, because by the time you go from each cohort will have a meeting to plan and you kind of write what's changed in HubSpot since we did that. And then AIs come along, so you sort of, well, how does that make any difference? How do I stay at the forefront of things? How do I keep learning? And I think I'm challenged consistently now. I think there's always something around the corner.
So the idea that you're working in a product and in a place where things constantly change, and there's just because the product changes, you're seeing, you do this thing with the HubSpot Superman Bootcamp, and that's new cohorts of people you're meeting all the time. You're introducing them to this tool. Those sorts of ingredients have kept the job very, very unique on a daily, weekly, like monthly basis for you. That's what it sounds like.
Definitely, because you could be doing a deep discovery of a process and spend 2 days in a dark room mapping it out, or you could have somebody come to you with a problem that they can't solve, and a lot of the time it takes that sort of slightly unconventional thinking to sort of, how can I am the sort of person that has woken up at certainly at 2:00 in the morning before, dash to get a laptop because suddenly a problem's worked itself out in my head. And I got it. And I mean, my colleagues will tell you I think new people generally will think I'm insane because I get so excited when I suddenly, that problem that's been rolling around in your head for 2 weeks, the answer suddenly comes to you while you're out on a walk on a wet Wednesday, and you have to I've got to go write that down.
Okay, and like when you see this, like when you see, like, so it's the problems that you like to solve, right? Now, if you have if you have like so there's learning, right, which is like, kind of like, learning something, the product, whatever, and there's teaching it, which I think you have both sides of it. So on you correct me if I'm wrong. If on a regular day, you could have like a call with a client, maybe two, three, that you're asking these why questions, you're trying to figure out what's going on, and you get these problems that you're trying to solve. Sometimes you wake up at 2 in the morning solving them. And then the same day you have a call with like the super admin boot camp, the cohort, or maybe a student in the cohort or whatever, and they're just starting from scratch, and you just have to switch gears almost entirely, right? From a patient, for you're like a doctor doing surgery on a patient, all of a sudden to an intern, and you're just saying, okay, look, hey, this is how the hospital works. So I mean, does that help keep it fresh in some way, or?
It does. I mean, the boot camp it can be very, very. It really keeps you on your toes because we'll have people that have literally just started using HubSpot, but we'll have people that have been using it for 7, 8 years, and we always look at the experience levels, and then you have to kind of try and dial up or down the content to make sure you're helping everybody. But we
Sure.
do every week we do after hours, so we'll do the teaching session, and then we'll have sort of 30 minutes where we're available, and people will bring their problems, and that is the absolutely the stiffest examination because
Really?
you've got 100 people and or however many people are that stay for after hours, and each one has a unique problem. They have a whole organization behind it that you know nothing about, and it's that thing where sometimes you shouldn't solve until you've got all the information, but sometimes you can solve. But a lot of the time, they'll come to you and say, "Well, here's my big problem," and the first question you then ask them is, "Why? Why are you trying to do that?
Mhm.
Explain it to me." But it's always, yeah, it's certainly very fresh. Different problems, different organizations, different. I mean, we probably get people from about 28 different countries accounted on the last one,
Wow.
including
Incredible.
Australia. There was somebody that tuned in at 2 o'clock in the morning in Perth for the boot camp, which is just mad.
And I mean, well, not mad. I mean, those boot camps are, pretty well put together. I mean, like they're the stuff of legend in the ecosystem, right? And people always talk about them. Oh, I went to the cohort, I went to this boot camp, and it's a big thing. So I wouldn't call it mad,
Well,
but I
I
mean,
mean,
like
mad in the sort of more of a gentle, mad
you're
keen.
crazy kind of way. Yeah,
Yeah,
not too.
not a no. I mean, massive respect to those people who did it. I think, and I was lucky enough to do some of the original boot camps as well with Dan Tyre
Same time.
in person in Dublin, which was very much an early career highlight when I first started working at BabelQuest.
And do you see like, so they always say youth is wasted on the young, right? So do you see some of these people in these cohorts maybe making the same mistakes that you have or you did, and do you ever get into the weeds with them on that sort of stuff, or is it strictly about the product and the
It's
solutions?
thought process is really important. I think we talk a lot about mindsets, and it's almost that at some point we'll talk about this whole idea. You have to think like a librarian because you need to know where everything is and what it does. Because if you don't, you can't solve effectively, or you're gonna if you know 30% of what's available, you're gonna lean heavily on that 30%. So mindset's a fairly big part, and it's actually something I see in all aspects of the job. It's that sometimes when people are struggling, it's because they're not thinking about something the right way. They're kind of thinking, I'm a marketer, so I want to solve a marketing problem. But actually, when you drill into it, it's a process problem. It's an alignment problem. It's a KPI problem, and you can often the art that I've had to certainly learn is being able to ask questions that help people work out the problem for themselves. It's
Okay.
I don't know if you've got kids, but
Yeah. Yeah.
that thing with kids where you sometimes have to make that decision: am I going to let the child fall on its face, or am I going to stop it? And you sort of that's quite extreme. Anybody that's going to my child's just there looking at me going, "What on earth is Daddy saying?" But it's almost that sometimes you have to make mistakes yourself to learn from them, and sometimes you can learn from other people's mistakes.
Yeah, the system has a way of correcting everything and everyone, doesn't it? That's what my dad always tells me, and I tell my kids all the time.
Yeah.
System has a way of correcting, the good habits and the bad habits, rewarding the good habits and teaching you things from the bad habits. So yeah, I totally buy into that narrative. So you could tell your child on the right there. Yeah, yeah, this is exactly a logical thing. And like so now let's talk about like the let's go. And it's kind of interesting how it goes full circle because I'm sure as a child of medical professionals, you probably heard them asking questions to people all the
Mm.
time. And I'm sure as a salesperson, what made you a good salesperson is what was asking questions, right? I mean, you don't survive 12 years with just taking orders. I mean, you have to uncover problems and then
Mm.
have to be able to convince someone that your offering is the solution to that problem. And that's how you make money, right? So how do you so where did this skill come from? I mean, this whole questioning skill. I mean, is it something you've always had? Is it
I
derived over time?
I think it's something I've learnt over time and experience. I think it's those times when you try and solve without. If we kind of go back to early sales calls I'd made and listening to them, it's when you're selling and you ask people questions and you get to the point where I talk about I like the idea of constructive tension. I've got a problem, but I think someone can help me with it, and you're ready to book that next call. But once that person starts to try and solve for you without having all the knowledge, they're either almost putting their hand in the air and saying, I don't know what I'm doing, or they're trying to sell you something because they've got a target. And I think it takes time. And anybody who's learnt that early on, fair play to you, I think. But over time, you learn that you need all the information before you can decide what's going on. And I think you could put that back to a doctor's analogy. If you put your symptoms, you put I've got a sore head into Google. Before you know it, it's telling you you've got something terrifying. That's where you need the doctor to ask you the right questions. And I think fully understanding what's happening and why helps you solve. And if you don't, then you're probably going to make a mistake or two.
Absolutely. And did you ask the questions to yourself when you were staying at that in the same job ad role for too long, or did it just like you say, am I here for too long? Am I getting stagnant here? Is this industry getting stagnant? Did you ask those questions? Did you find anybody you're asking those questions yourself or no?
I don't think I did, and I don't think anyone asked me those questions either. I think that's another learning that if you're working with people, trying to keep it fresh and understand them is always a big thing.
So, it was just something, it was like terrain you were reading. You were not necessarily questioning yourself. It just kind of came. I wonder, but also maybe the industry at the time was also questioning itself, right? Because our job as is going to be a thing in the future. I mean, it looks like your timing was impeccable. I mean,
Mm.
just so I mean,
No,
like it looked like
I consider myself incredibly lucky that I kind of made that move to HubSpot and also to a sort of an agency, a consultancy that where they kind of encouraged me to be who I am and to kind of think the way I do and to actually kind of plot that course.
yeah. So I mean, let's talk about how this mistake ended for you, because obviously, you stayed too long. You felt you moved on, still stayed in sales. Now you're totally like a sales doctor, consultant, right? So take us through that. What's a day at BabelQuest like for you? I mean, like, what's the rub there?
So I suppose a typical day. People will ask me during the recruitment process, "What's a typical day?" So, for example, Monday, typically, first hour is HubSpot updates. And it's going to see what's new and then writing down the ones which excite me that I think are interesting, and then trying to think about use cases, because you can often tell people here's something new, but if they don't know what to do with it, then it's meaningless to them. So the value I think you can add there is understanding, and often you'll try and think about here's something new, and then I'll typically start thinking about, here's something new that will solve a problem that I had last week with this client. So there'll be some comms. Then we'll do Monday morning start the week meetings, and then it's typically into, if we're implementing, then workshops. So if we're all feeling up to it, then you'll probably have 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon of deep dives and understanding, and it will be process mapping. I like my process. I like to start with their process, because if I know what they're trying to do, we're kind of like, here's the current state. Let's look at what the future state should be. I'll spend a lot of time then reviewing things. I'll do a lot of work testing. So I've got test portals that I'll try and build things in to see if they work. And I'm also finding now I'm having to go back to maths, which is something I never thought I'd be using that much again. But suddenly we're into calculations, equations, data sets, and all of those sorts of things.
Unbelievable.
Today I've done a lot of reporting, just sort of, I think 30 or so deep reports going down a sales process.
Wow.
And you're constantly thinking, how does this work? And it's, can I report on that? Do I have a property to hold the data? Do I have the data? Is it right? Can we trust it? So lots of things like that. Every now and again I get to do something like this, which is a lot of fun, and gets me to kind of think about what I do and all the rest of it. And then there'll be things like planning for boot camp. I do a lot of training for clients as well. So you'll be designing kind of bespoke training sessions that, are we teaching them to follow their process, or are we teaching them how to use the tool?
That sounds like a very full day. I mean, where does, I know you and I are both cricket fans. I mean, where does the time to keep up with cricket come into play? I mean, where does that all come into?
I mean, it's definitely not on my phone right now. England currently playing India, so
there you go. So yeah, I mean, so you, but it's got to be, I mean, like, you sounds like you're like just totally slammed most days. I mean, just doing tons of things.
They keep me busy. I mean, one of the other things that is really nice is I've got some fantastic colleagues that are very clever. So it's always nice to have people that you're working with that are almost have similar skill sets, but slightly different. So it's that sort of T-shaped, deep expertise, but also something
General.
across the top, so that we can kind of communicate. And I get to work with my colleague Hannah, for example, who's incredibly clever and sort of currently doing the HubSpot tips and tricks things. There's lots of clever people that I work with, which is nice. So we'll bounce ideas off each other as a team as well, which is I think quite rewarding. And when we bring new people on, then suddenly it's a new ideas, new ways of looking at things, and new things to learn. I think it's once you stop learning, pretty much you're done. And
Done.
I think when you're teaching, you can learn from the people you're teaching, however junior they are. I think the boot camp, if you hark back to that, we're learning from the people that are doing the boot camp, because there'll always be somebody that will ask a question, that will show you something, that will make you go, oh, hang on a minute. So it's constant.
Constant. Well, Chris, like I could talk to you for hours on this stuff, and it's just it's been amazing for you to kind of come on and jam us about what your mistake was. I had no idea that you thought that staying in a place for 10 years was going to be a problem for you, because I just know that you've been in BabelQuest for a long time. That was totally, out of this world. I didn't know that was coming. I really appreciate you being upfront and just talking about your life and your day with all of us here. So thanks a lot for coming on.
Absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, and so for all the listeners out there, if you liked anything, if you want to get in touch with Chris, why don't you let us know how people can get a hold of you?
Yeah, come and find me on LinkedIn. If you just search Chris Grant BabelQuest, you're bound to find us. BabelQuest this side of the pond, BabelQuest the other side.
That's
Neither
right.
is wrong. They're both fine. But yeah, just come find me on LinkedIn, connect. I'm always trying to share like videos, things I'm excited by, all of that sort of thing, and interested in whatever anybody else has to offer to the conversation as well.
So, yeah, so you guys get a hold of him on LinkedIn, watch his videos. They're mildly entertaining. So, anyways, Chris, thanks again for coming on. Appreciate you.
Such an absolute pleasure. Thank you.